let's get into it here on rest of season top 150. One of the reasons this is such a difficult exercise, and believe me, I look at this stuff and I'm like, this is really, really hard exercise because we're trying to balance what's happening now, how players are being used now, how are players performing now with how they'll be used and perform a month from now or 2 months from now, while also keeping in mind that you can't get behind too early because what people do in December doesn't really matter if you're already out of the fantasy playoffs. So it is a lot to manage here. Also, trying to bake in injuries and injury timelines for return complicates things as well. And then we have bye weeks coming as well. Once some teams have their bye behind them and others don't, that'll be a factor in the rest of season top 150 rankings. Also here, the story of the week, and the reason I bring up all this balancing stuff, the story of the week, I got to tell you, Mark, the people are not happy. I mean, I can't even go 2 seconds without someone who has a problem with a rookie running back this year. I'm talking about Ashton Jeanty, Jeanty and Hampton, TreVeyon Henderson, RJ Harvey, namely. I think the easy thing to say that people don't want to hear and I actually don't think is the right take is it's early. Don't worry about it. These guys are going to be fine. You can say that when guys are going in the 8th round or the 9th round. When you were going 11th or 12th or 13th overall, like Ashton Jeanty, just saying, hey, man, be patient. Part of the cost of going in round 1, round 2, round 3, and round 4, you have to perform right out of the gate, right? And that is my expectation when I take guys in rounds 1, 2, 3, or 4 to perform right out of the gate. I'm not that interested in back-weighted production when I take guys that high. So I just want to put that out there. And let's start. We're going to go through a bunch of the rookies here today. Let's start with Ashton Jeanty. Mark, where are you at on him right now?
I think the most concerning part about Ashton Jeanty is that we saw him lose pass down work to Zamir White and Dylan Lobby in week 2. And I also think some of the rookie risk and rookie, sentiment is heightened because we saw Jeanty play on Monday Night Football as well as we've seen Jeanty and Hampton in primetime the last 2 weeks as well. So more eyeballs are on that. People weren't fully freaking out over Jeanty when he only had 38 rushing yards on 19 carries in week 1 against the Patriots because that was kind of buried at a 1 p.m. Eastern time game. And then, the Monday Night Football game brings it to the forefront. So with Jeanty certainly concerned because I think coming into this season, you could question the efficiency behind this offensive line in Vegas, but I think like the falling back point was, okay, well, Jeanty, they spent a top 10 pick on him in the draft. They're going to have him on the field at all times. He's going to get the pass down work. He showed a couple years ago at Boise that he can handle that pass down work and is going to be effective there. And already 2 weeks in, that claim is getting questioned. So certainly have some concerns over Jeanty just in terms of how many touches he's going to get per game. This offensive line does seem like a serious concern. Want to shout out a Josh Norris tweet here. He said there are 54 running backs with 10 plus carries this season. Ashton Jeanty ranks 54th, so dead last with negative 0.1 yards before contact per attempt. So Jeanty getting hit behind the line of scrimmage on average with, on his carries this season. So just tough when he's losing the pass down work. And, if he's an early down grinder in this Vegas offense, that's a problem. So we dropped him pretty far in the rest of season rankings this week.
Yeah, down to 25 overall, down 15 spots from last week is Ashton Jeanty. Part of the assumption was that like Mark said, if you take a guy 6th overall, you cannot have Zamir White and Dylan Lobby on the field in key situations. You just can't. And they are right now. Now, is that going to be the case a month from now or 6 weeks from now? I don't know. And on the efficiency stuff, offensive line is bad. I mean, it's also bad when you're playing against NFL defenses, when you're used to playing against, the Sisters of the Poor on Fox Sports 1 or whatever the hell he was playing against. Again, Penn State had no problem shutting down Ashton Jeanty's efficiency when they played in the National Football Playoffs. So I'm worried on Jeanty, both from a efficiency, offensive line, level of competition stuff, and I'm worried on Jeanty from the usage perspective. So I think 25 overall is fine. I'd probably personally take James Cook over him. We'll get to Chase Brown and Breece Hall here in a second. But yeah, I think docking Jeanty down 15 spots was the right play. Let's go to Jeanty and Hampton here, Daigle. Jeanty and Hampton's usage has actually been decent. He's actually playing on passing downs. He's getting goal line work. His team has been pretty good. And yet, it's his play that's been bad. He has just not been able to get anything going whatsoever. So Najee played more. He went from 12 snaps to 20 snaps, I believe it was, in week 2. I thought Najee at the end of the game looked good closing it out. Daigle, where you at on Amarian Hampton here rest of season?
Hampton is interesting because we were betting on the athleticism, and that's what is not being shown right now. One of the worst running backs in the league in terms of EPA per play, which highlights individual performance, as opposed to a stat like Mark said, yards before contact per attempt, which is an offensive line stat, and that's what's happening to Jeanty. He's being hit behind the line of scrimmage basically every single carry. And so for Hampton, it banked on that week 1 usage carrying over, where he finished 4th among all running backs in his share of backfield touches. We all knew Najee Harris's role would increase, but we were all questioning and had different outlooks for how much it would increase. And it increased all the way. So much so that in week 2 against the Chargers, Hampton handled less than half of the team's touches. You look at it now, Najee Harris through 2 games is averaging a career high 4.8 yards per touch. So this timeshare, it being a 50-50, presumably moving forward, yes, I am absolutely concerned. Although I know it's hard to sit here as someone with Hampton on his benches and say, I still believe Hampton is a second half breakout, but now I'm also scrambling to pad for that individual who I do think you can bench for players like Jalen Warren, Ramondre Stevenson, who we'll get to in a second. I do think we are now looking at a player like Hampton who is an RB4 for the time being.
Yeah. Well, if you actually think that, if you actually think he's an RB4 for the time being, I don't think that you would take him 34 overall in your draft, right? I don't think that you would take a guy in the 3rd round of your draft right now if you thought he was an RB4 right out of the gate. I mean, that would just be crazy, right, Daigle?
That would be crazy, yes. But I guess I'm looking at this from the next couple of weeks, not the rest of season, because also if we did a redraft just for week 3, Amarian Hampton would not be a 3rd round pick.
Right. I mean,
that would not be 34.
Right. And I understand. It's like it's tough on Hampton. I don't know if you guys remember. I think we were at like around 45 overall in the best ball ranks after the draft on Amarian Hampton, and then the Najee I thing happened, and he started getting pulled up really high. And people were taking him at like the 2-3 turn, like 24, 25 overall. I think we settled in closer back to like 33 or something like that, or 32. But my point is that a big reason that he moved up so much and his ADP got so high was a Najee I thing, which now seems to be a total non-factor. And when it first happened, I thought Najee was a pretty good pick at like 140, 150, stuff like that. I was taking Najee there before the stupid I thing, and I wasn't taking a lot of Hampton at 30 whatever overall. The other part of this is that the Chargers have gone full-blown pass centric, right? And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for Hampton. He plays well in the pass game. He's been out there for more routes and most of the routes ahead of Najee Harris. So I don't think that's the issue. I don't think that's a bad thing. That could be a good thing for a lot of running backs if they play well in the pass game like Hampton does. So I'd probably personally be a little bit lower than this 34 overall on Hampton here. I don't think, as opposed to Jeanty, who's competing with total dust balls, Najee Harris is a solid NFL player, man. And if Hampton can't get it done, they're going to have no problem playing Najee for 35, 40% of the snaps, etc. While we're on the Chargers here real quick, I just wanted to note on Quinton Johnston and Keenan Allen stuff here. With them being so pass-centric and having a very good Justin Herbert back there, we've been moving them up, right? Keenan and Quinton Johnston. I also think that Ladd McConkey is an interesting buy low after he was 3rd among wide receivers in targets in that game on Monday night. Didn't do much. If someone who's watching that and wanted to dump Ladd McConkey, like, give me Ladd McConkey. He's going to have an awesome year as the best wide receiver on this team with Justin Herbert throwing so much. Yeah, but Jack, where you at on Quinton Johnston and Keenan Allen right now? We're up to 86 overall on Keenan Allen, 92 overall on Quinton Johnston.
Yeah, I mean, the Chargers have almost a 15% pass rate over expectation. That's 7% higher than the next closest team. I mean, they're not going to stay at that level the whole year, but it really seems like Greg Roman and Harbaugh are embracing the fact that they have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And the Chargers have also thrown to wide receivers 82% of the time so far. That's 6% ahead of the next closest team. That's another number that probably won't stick at that rate. They probably will throw to running backs and tight ends a little more over the rest of the season, but it seems like this is a team that's going to pass a lot. And it seems like this is a team that's going to target their wide receivers a lot. So I think there's definitely room for McConkey, Keenan Allen, and Quinn Johnston to all be pretty viable fantasy options.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, this Chargers pass game is going to be, and especially we haven't really seen them get pushed fully yet. Like, let's get a game with Justin Herbert driving back 40 times and see what happens. And that'll be exciting here for sure. Let's keep it going, Jack, on rookie running backs. Third one to talk about is Quinshon Judkins. This is one that people aren't panicked about. This is one that people are actually excited about because Judkins made his NFL debut, comes in, and looks really good. Now, a lot of those runs, or some of them at least, were against Ravens second stringers, right? This was fourth quarter. They were getting trucked. So I don't want to go too overboard on Quinshon Judkins' efficiency. Also playing into this rank that we have him at here, 78 overall, Quinshon Judkins possibly still facing a suspension. I haven't heard anything about this lately, but the NFL has been known to suspend guys under the personal conduct policy despite no charges being filed in the Quinshon Judkins case. But I was at least impressed, Jack, that such little practice time, just signs his contract, comes in and plays well, and also 3 targets and caught all 3. Now, the thing that Evan and I talked about yesterday, I'm worried about this offense just overall when Joe Flacco is gone. And so I'm trying to temper expectations for all Brown stuff in the anticipation of Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders getting in there, which to me is a massive blow to everyone that you see on your screen there. So, Jack, where are you at on Quinshon Judkins here ahead of week 3?
I thought it was an incredibly encouraging debut for Judkins. I was honestly pretty shocked that he came in after 2 practices and got 10 out of 20 running back carries, and even more shocked, honestly, that he had 3 targets. A lot of times we can see these running backs come in and immediately contribute in the ground game, but it takes a while to get them up to speed and contribute as a pass catcher. But they immediately gave Judkins a little bit of work there. And Daigle also brought up on our call that Judkins was really good, even if he was playing against backups. He forced a missed tackle on half of his touches. So Judkins immediately got more volume than we were expecting and was really good on that volume. I do think that the offense is going to take a hit once Flacco goes out and Gabriel comes in, but I still think the fact that they're willing to give Judkins 13 touches off of 2 practices since July bodes very well for his rest of season workload.
I mean, they took Quinshon Judkins in the draft 36th overall, ahead of TreVeyon Henderson and a bunch of other really, really good running backs that they could have taken there. So clearly they want Judkins to be their feature back. They saw something in him that wanted that. And obviously it's not great for Dylan Sampson. We're down to 125th overall on Dylan Sampson. If you could dump him on someone that would pay just based on box scores, that's an interesting play to make there also. Let's go to Mark TreVeyon Henderson. Here's another one that people are panicked about. I really liked TreVeyon Henderson coming into this week. They were playing the Dolphins. It sounded like the expectation from around the team. We saw Mike Reese report it, and just would make sense is to get TreVeyon Henderson more work. And I think that was the plan. Then he goes out, commits 2 holding penalties on offense, 1 holding penalty on special teams, also blows a pass protection assignment, ends up playing just 19 snaps. Antonio Gibson played 10, and Ramondre went berserk. So, Mark, we're down to 50 overall on TreVeyon Henderson. I'm sure people are going to say that's too high for a player who only played 19 snaps in week 2. Mark, what do you think about TreVeyon Henderson?
I think with TreVeyon Henderson and Jeanty Hampton currently in rankings, we are heavily weighting the back end of season production that we're expecting as these rookies get their feet under them more. And while TreVeyon Henderson didn't see a jump in snaps from week 1 to week 2, they kind of stayed the same. I mean, he played 35% of snaps in week 1, 32% in week 2. His route share was about the same as well. So it wasn't like his usage necessarily went down. From week to week, which I think is okay, but certainly the concerns here are that it's not just Ramondre Stevenson that he's dealing with. Antonio Gibson also saw his snap share increase from week 1 to week 2. I think that might be because of the holding penalties. It's hard to know kind of how much that'll carry over week to week here for someone like Mike Vrabel, but I don't know. For TreVeyon Henderson, it's tricky because right now, especially in half PPR, like I don't think you can feel confident about starting him at all. But do we expect a high second round pick to eventually overtake Ramondre Stevenson? I still do. I'm still somewhat confident in that, and hopefully like the pass protection issues can be can be resolved throughout the course of the season. But it is a tricky spot. I mean, I think Henderson is mostly a hold right now, and potentially a buy low if people are panicking. But he's similar to Marion Hampton in that I think, as the season goes along, things will continue to get better. But certainly the draft or the cost you paid on draft day is not what you're getting right now. But I don't know. Yeah.
Well, the thing about TreVeyon is I expect him to have the James White role right away, right? And the Shane Vereen role, the Danny Woodhead right out of the gate. And for Antonio Gibson to get in there and get 10 snaps, and you don't have this featured pass catching role for TreVeyon Henderson, to me, that's the biggest disappointment. But the other thing about it is Ramondre was bad in week 1. He was incredible. Now, yes, he was playing the Dolphins in week 2. But if you think Ramondre keeps playing like that, it's definitely a problem for TreVeyon Henderson. Now, I don't necessarily think Ramondre keeps up that level of efficiency. We know he had fumbling problems last year also. So I still like TreVeyon for sure. I need him to be getting into the James White, that like 5, 6, 7 targets per game role to be really excited about it. The other thing about these rankings, like it's hard to be specific to your team. If you're 0-2 and like you had to get out from under Amari Hampton or TreVeyon Henderson just to like try to get some wins, that's a different story than if you're 1-1 or if you have other guys that you can start, et cetera. So, team specifics are going to matter here also with how to handle some of these players. Daigle, let's go to RJ Harvey. So RJ Harvey was one that expectations were not as high, right? And so he was available in the 6th or 7th round of a lot of drafts. So at that point, I'm like more okay that he's not getting a ton of work out of the gate. My bet was always that J.K. Dobbins was going to play a lot, especially on pass downs. I thought that on base, RJ Harvey would play more. And I did not think that Tyler Bidet would be playing 10 to 15 snaps every week. So it's definitely been a worse start than I anticipated for RJ Harvey. Daigle, where you at right now? We're down to 74 overall on RJ Harvey.
Unlike the other individuals who teased us in week 1, at least it's been consistent with RJ Harvey, where he's been the third role in front of Tyler Bidet, but behind J.K. Dobbins. We're still questioning, however, how long J.K. Dobbins can last. Even last year when he came back from injury for the Chargers, he was one of the league's least efficient running backs. All he did was score touchdowns. That could be the case for the Broncos the rest of the season, but R.J. Harvey still has room to grow where he's done nothing to get demoted. Anytime he's gotten more carries, he's just exploded upfield for 10-plus yards. So RJ Harvey still is someone I have faith in, but I do think we're right in keeping him buried just because we haven't seen them have confidence to give him more of a role that we believe he'll have just yet.
Buddy, I got news for you. No one thinks that we have him buried. They think that we have him way too high. Trust me. No one thinks that 74 overall is buried on RJ Harvey. People are calling him a third stringer and he should be in the hundreds. I mean, that's what people are saying. So no one thinks that we have him too high, too low, buried. People think that we have him too high. One other thing that I'd say about this, I don't think that like there is actually injury prone. I think the word injury prone gets overused. However, if I had to bet on one running back to get hurt this year, and I don't want to do that because obviously that's bad, but J.K. Dobbins, given what he's been through, is one of the most likely running backs to get hurt, in my opinion, here this season. We also have the quote last week from Sean Payton, which Sean Payton quotes are like absolutely meaningless, but I just wanted to put it out there that he did say ideally he'd go to 2 backs, and hopefully RJ Harvey can make him do that and ice out Tyler Bidet. But yeah, the Harvey thing I think is better in that we didn't spend as much, obviously, to get him, and he can be fine on your bench here for a little bit.
And like Mark said, we're in a situation where we do so many things that establish a run where these questions, at least for week 3, can be answered to bench RJ Harvey. Let's look at Pat Thorman's rankings or anything like that, for example. But yes, when we're talking about the rest of the season, it is a complicated conversation since we are trying to project for week 8 on. We're only through 2 games and everyone thinks the sky is falling. Everyone forgets, we do this every single year, how long an NFL season is and how many things happen over the course of month to month to month. So You're still playing the long game here.
Yes, we are. But when you're 0-4, no one's going to be listening to John Daigle on the rest of season top 150 show. So
You're
we have
right.
to keep that in mind there. Also, by the way, if you want Troy Franklin takes, I know you guys see him on the screen there. Daigle covered Troy Franklin plenty in all the waiver content yesterday. All right. Other rookie running back that I feel like is an easy one, Jack, is this Caleb Johnson situation. I mean, I didn't really like Caleb Johnson just because I made a pact with myself not to take any Arthur Smith guys. But I did not think that it would go like this, where Caleb Johnson can't even get on the field. I believe he's played 4 snaps through 2 games and could be a healthy scratch here this week after he messed up on special teams. So obviously, Caleb Johnson, if you had to drop him, I wouldn't kill you for it. We have removed Caleb Johnson from the rest of season top 150. I think maybe a better question, Jack, is on Jaylen Warren. We're up to 72 overall after seeing him get big pass game usage. What do you think about Steelers running back right now?
Yeah, I mean, the outlook is pretty brutal for Johnson right now. Like you said, he has 2 carries through 2 games, 2 snaps in each game, and he has -1 total rushing yards through the first 2 games of his NFL career. And he messed up on special teams badly too. The Steelers don't have a 4th running back on their active roster. I think if they did, he'd probably be inactive next week. We'll see. We'll see if they call someone up to be RB3 over him next week, since he's not returning kicks anymore. But it's definitely not great. I think for Warren, it's pretty bullish. He started to get a little bit more of the passing down work too last week. He played about half of the third downs and half of the 2-minute drill snaps, whereas in week 1 that was just fully Kenny Gainwell's role. And he had a 65-yard catch and run, and Aaron Rodgers this week was talking up getting him more opportunities in the passing game, and he's clearly the RB1 on early downs. He is only at 3.4 yards per carry so far. He's been much more efficient in earlier years of his career, so maybe it's fair to question, can he sustain his efficiency in this larger role? But strictly from a role perspective, it's been really good for him so far, and it seems like it's growing in the pass downs.
One thing about Aaron Rodgers is he's typically good for fantasy running backs, just the way he throws to them and efficiency and stuff like that. So that's a good thing. The other good thing I've been thinking about for Jaylen Warren is Steelers defense might suck. I mean, I can't believe how bad they've been, but through 2 weeks, they have been absolutely dreadful while facing Justin Fields and Sam Darnold. And I think that's good for Jaylen Warren because these like defensive battles that we've seen the Steelers get into historically, that's not good for Jaylen Warren or really anyone in the offense. If you get into some of these wild games like we've seen the Steelers get into in the first 2 weeks, that's better for Jaylen Warren there. So we're up to 72 overall on Jaylen Warren. I like that. Last rookie running back, Mark, is one that we got to look at after the Tank Bigsby trade, and that is Bashal Tutin. Now, we're up to 81 overall on Tutin. He did get 10 opportunities in that game against the Bengals. And that was a close game. It wasn't like, oh, it's garbage time. Let's see what Tutin can do. That was a very close game against the Bengals. They trusted him to get 10 opportunities in that game. And man, I'm not a tape bro. You guys know me. But it is hard to not look at Bashal Tutin and be like, whoa, that dude can play. So, Mark, where you at on Jacksonville RB now? We got the first look with Tank Bigsby gone.
I was really happy with how this played out in week 2 because it was pretty much exactly how we had it projected in terms of Bashal Tutin absorbing kind of all of the Tank Bigsby snaps and touches from week 1, and those not necessarily bumping up Travis Etienne's role, and that's pretty much how it played out there against the Bengals. And then Bashal Tutin also looked pretty explosive on his snaps. Had that great move in the open field to get into the end zone on one of his 2 receptions. Also took a screen, I think, probably 25 yards down the field as well. So, when I look at this Jags backfield, I think both players are valuable in fantasy right now, but the fact that Tutin was handpicked by this new regime and, kind of talked about all offseason by GM James Gladstone of how excited they were about Tutin. He's the one I'd rather kind of buy at this point in time. And I think Etienne could potentially be a sell high. Again, I think both have fantasy value at this point in time, but kind of as we go throughout the course of the season, I would not be shocked at all if this became more of kind of like a 45-45 split between Tutin and Etienne, and then we still have LaQuint Allen mixing in for some third downs. So if Allen ended up going away at any point, I think like these guys would easily both be RB2s on a weekly basis, just given how we've seen Liam Cohen's offenses prop up RB production. Last year, Bucky Irving and Rachaad White were valuable for for healthy parts of the season. So this is just a backfield that I want to invest in. Again, I think Tootin is probably a little cheaper right now, and so I'd be interested in going after him in the trade market, and think ETN could potentially be a little bit of a sell high right now.
Yeah, I mean, the general market's definitely going to have this gap wider, right? I think like most people would think that ETN should be way ahead of Bashal Tootin. ETN's clearly the feature back, and Tootin is the change of pace guy. So I think if you wanted to make a move like that, I'm not as interested in selling ETN. But yeah, if you wanted to make a move like that, I think the trade market will value ETN a bit higher here. All right. Reminder, this show is brought to you by our friends at DraftKings. The NFL season is here, and there is no better way to get closer to the action than with DraftKings Daily Fantasy, the ultimate destination for football fans. Right now, our partners at DK are giving new customers a chance to play free for their share of millions in prizes with their first deposit on the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app. Download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app and enter promo code ETR or scan the QR code to play free for your share of millions with your first deposit. That's for new DraftKings customers. Just download the app for your free shot today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available. For problem gambling, call 888-7897-777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. Minimum $5 deposit required. One single-use $3 ticket rewarded. Ticket rewards are site credits valid for use on eligible DraftKings contests. Tickets expire 14 days after being issued. Ends on December 31st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. See terms at DraftKings.com/promotions. Sponsored by DraftKings. All right, Daigle. The other big story coming out of week 2 was all the quarterback injuries. We're not going to cover them all here today. You can listen to team by team for more on that. The big ones, though, that I want to cover here today are Bengals and Vikings. Let's start with Bengals. How do you think about moving rest of season now that we know Joe Burrow is expected to miss 3 months, aka pretty much the rest of the season?
And when you talk about short term versus rest of season, it's also tough because, as I mentioned in the waiver column, since a lot of people, especially in Superflex leagues, have to go get Jake Browning, it's a miserable run out these next 2 games. The market is already setting the Bengals with the 7th lowest team total on the road against Minnesota in week 3, and then they travel to Denver in week 4. In one quarterback leagues, you would never touch Jake Browning in those situations, but a lot of people will be stuck doing so. And then we're asking, how does that trickle down to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins? And I'm certainly worried. I don't think this is the time to sell. I would actually rather wait after these next 2 murderers row of games and then try to buy low on these individuals, since we've at least seen Jake Browning have multiple 300-plus yard games. He made 7 starts for reference in 2023. He was a top 10 quarterback in 5 of those. And I don't think that's really anything he does. I think the elite talent around him elevates him, and I think that can happen. I'm just worried for having a different conversation in 2 weeks in which, again, we can then buy these players lower.
Well, I mean, Jake Browning in 2023 showed he is not afraid to sling it, right? Yep. Some of these backup quarterbacks get in there and they play tight. They don't throw deep. They don't play aggressively. Jake Browning did not show that in 2023, and he's had 2 more years to get comfortable with the system, learn from Burrow. So I'm somewhat optimistic here. The other thing that I'd say, who is Malik Neighbors' quarterback? Who is Justin Jefferson's quarterback? You see these guys overcome Russell Wilson or Carson Wentz or JJ McCarthy or whatever. Jackson Smith-Njigba has Sam Darnold. So like it's not a total death knell. I like where we have Jamar Chase here at 12th overall. It's going to be more run heavy, right? So we have to bake that in. And so I think it's not great for T. So you're going to have just like less volume. You're going to have a worse touchdown rate. You're going to score fewer points in games. And obviously that's not good for anyone. We're down to 54 overall here on T. Higgins, which I think is an appropriate dock here as well. The other concern, all the stuff that I just mentioned, it's bad for Chase Brown. And people are like, they want to give up on Chase Brown already, Daigle. I thought Chase Brown's usage and actually the way he was playing was actually fine. Like, he has had no room to run whatsoever. They have stacked him up on every goal line chance that he's had, pretty much. Now, without Joe Burrow, one of the best throwers of the football to the running back position in the NFL, without Joe Burrow leading you down to getting inside the 5-yard line where Chase Brown scores touchdowns, I feel kicked in the stomach on Chase Brown, because now, before I was like, yeah, I probably have too much Chase Brown. I took him over JT a few times in big spots, which was just terrible. But now without Burrow, I at first I was like, oh, it's going to be okay. Without Burrow now I'm actually like worried about Chase Brown. So Daigle, as we finish up the Bengals conversation here, how worried are you on Chase Brown rest of season?
You should be very worried, because on one hand, we have a running back who has out-touched its backfield 41-2 this season, but he's showing us the same thing he showed us last year, in that he's not explosive. He doesn't break tackles. Not impressive at all, actually. But the one skeleton key of all of fantasy football is getting touches. And then it's our job to project for those touches. The good news is Chase Brown is still getting those touches. But last year, at least, getting those touches were for an offense that was not only hammering him 5.5 targets per game, but also reaching the red zone at league high rates. This offense with Jake Browning will not do that. And so what does Chase Brown become then? This was a joke. It began in our Slack, but it's genuinely true. He's Javonte Williams.
No, I don't find that funny. I don't find that funny. I don't find that funny. You don't have to be funny,
but that's true. Because it's literally just a touch-based usage back and an explosive offense. That's what Javonte Williams is.
You were saying that before Joe Burrow got hurt, though. Now you can say it, but you were discounting that Joe Burrow can drag Chase Brown through, and I do not think Chase Brown is as bad as Daigle suggests. He was forcing plenty of missed tackles in week 1. I was watching with my own
top 30.
I was watching with my own 2 eyes.
Were you? I questioned that too.
All right, man.
I do want to mention on Chase Brown, I was surprised looking through the expected fantasy points model that we have that he's 5th among running backs through the first 2 weeks in expected fantasy points. And he does have the goal line role, on lock, it seems. So while I think Daigle is correct in that the Bengals will have fewer red zone trips with Browning in there, but certainly he's been like one of the biggest underperformers based on his opportunity at running back, and got to think that regresses a little bit.
We're also questioning if anyone's going to come for these touches, regardless of how inefficient he is. Obviously, we've seen a decade of Samaje Perine. That's not the answer. We haven't seen anything of Taj Brooks yet, but that's a day 3 running back. So maybe Chase Brown still holds on to this role. And that's an individual like the other guys we've talked about, where I'm still confidently starting Chase Brown and just crossing my fingers he gets in the end zone.
Oh, I still think he's going to get 20 touches in games. They're going to run the ball more. He's going to get 20 touches with Jake Browning for sure. So, there's still some outs here for Chase Brown. I'm not completely capitulating. The other big injury, Jack, was to JJ McCarthy. Injury or benching, whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter at this point. He's out 2 to 4 weeks. I actually kind of think that he's going to end up sitting through their week 6 bye, but we will see there. We have Justin Jefferson at 13 overall here. Now, the backup is Carson Wentz. He obviously had a good start to his career with the Eagles, like a really good start, had some injuries. Next thing you know, Eagles just wanted to dump him. Then I think he went to the Colts. They wanted to dump him. Then he went to the Rams. They wanted to dump him. I can't even keep track of all the places Carson Wentz has been at this point. My point is that nobody really wants this guy, but now he's going to be starting games for the Vikings. Jack, where are you at on? Oh, and I should also note Aaron Jones on IR with a hamstring thing. So we have Jordan Mason up to 60 overall here. But yeah, Jack, how bad or good do you think the Carson Wentz stuff is for Vikings offense?
Yeah, I don't think the drop off from McCarthy to Wentz is that big, but I think that in itself is kind of the problem, that there's not that JJ McCarthy's been so bad that there's not much of a drop off going to the backup. So I think the larger issue for Jefferson and Hawkinson and Addison and all these guys isn't the change in quarterback, but it's just been how disappointing McCarthy's been. On the other hand, the volume's still good. Justin Jefferson's at a 32% target share, Hawks at 17. But the Vikings just haven't really run many plays. Through 2 weeks, they're at 47.5 real plays per game, which is just plays excluding spikes and kneel downs and all that stuff. Last year, the lowest real plays per game in the NFL was Carolina, around 58. So they're going to run more plays. It's going to get better. But I do think that just with how bad McCarthy's been, you kind of have to temper expectations on these Vikings pass catchers relative to where we had them in preseason.
Long term, obviously no one wants to build around Carson Wentz, but short term, I don't think it's even a bad thing to see what he has, because we saw a couple years ago, Nick Mullins in 3 starts with Kevin O'Connell went over 300 yards in all 3 games. We saw Sam Darnold under Kevin O'Connell be comeback player of the year. JJ McCarthy's currently 30th in completion rate. He was so bad that maybe that was what was going wrong for the offense. It may not hurt to get someone else here under center.
Yeah, I mean, Carson Wentz is a veteran NFL quarterback. I think he'll be okay, and certainly a really good spot here for his first start home against the Bengals. I would also note offensive line problems for the Vikings have not helped JJ McCarthy. Obviously, no Darisaw. Center gets hurt. I mean, their offensive line's been playing terrible, and I thought they would have, top 5, top 10 unit here this year, and it has not played out that way for the Vikings. Jordan Addison will be off suspension after this week. I doubt that there's any moves to be made around him. If somebody was holding them, they're not going to give him up 1 week from when he's coming back. And if you were holding him, obviously I would hold him for 1 more week here and see what we can get out of Jordan Addison. Still have decent amount of optimism there relative to where he was being drafted. Okay, Mark, let's go to this Eagles stuff. So I'm not sure if you're aware, Mark, but the Eagles don't throw the football. They have abandoned the forward pass in favor of playing absurdly good defense, running the ball with the league's best, or one of the best offensive lines, and one of the planet's best running backs. And then anytime it's 3rd and 2 or 2nd and 2, 3 minutes is coming off the clock because it's going to be a few tush pushes. So people are going to say, how can you still have A.J. Brown at 24 overall and Devonta Smith at 55 overall when Jalen Hurts is dropping back 22, 23 times per game? So, Mark, what do you think about rest of season on Eagles pass catchers?
I want to set the stage here a little bit just on kind of our expectations for Philly. In the pass game last year, Philadelphia finished with a 49% pass rate and a league low -9% pass rate over expectation. So far this year, they are at a 50% pass rate and -6% pass rate over expectation. So honestly, throwing the ball even a little bit more than last year. But the dip right now has been in total play volume. And obviously, offensive coordinator last year, Kellen Moore, is now the head coach of the Saints. And Moore has been known to push pace pretty much everywhere he's been. So that's a bit more of my concern, is just over on the total play volume that the Eagles are going to get off this season compared to last year. So far through 2 games, Jalen Hurts has dropped back to has 22.5 pass attempts per game. Last year, he was only at 25.5 pass attempts per game. In 2023, he was at 32.6. The year before that, 30.7. So last year, it's the Eagles have league low pass rate over expectation, and Jalen Hurts still gets to 25.5 pass attempts per game. This year, he's been below that, but I think it's very fair to expect that to come up. And then when we talk about the wide receivers, last year, A.J. Brown was wide receiver 12 and half PPR points per game. And right now, we have him pretty much at that exact mark at wide receiver 12. So I think A.J. Brown is still a buy low at this point, similar with Devonta Smith. This is just still one of the most concentrated target trees in the entire NFL. So I do not think that the expectation should be that Jalen Hurts is going to only throw the ball 22 or 23 times per game. I think it's very, very logical to expect it to come up to the mid-20s, if not high 20s, and approaching 30, just expecting the Eagles not to steamroll every opponent this season. So I'm still in buy mode on the Eagles pass game. I think things are going to come up there for them.
Yeah, I get it. They are just so good. It's crazy. And they don't force anything. And I know A.J. Brown's going to start bitching at some point this year. I can feel it. He's going to start bitching, but I don't think they care. They play to win football games. It does not always look clean. And, like I said yesterday on Team by Team, Jalen Hurts is very capable of supporting really high-end wide receiver production when he's asked. Will he be asked in a home game against the Rams this week? Will he be asked at Tampa in week 4? I think for both those spots, maybe. But then home versus Broncos, Giants, Vikings, Giants. You get a couple games in here against the Packers and the Lions, Cowboys. In the fantasy playoffs, I will say this. Commanders is a good spot to pump up some volume for Jalen Hurts. That's week 16. Week 17 is at Buffalo, and that's a great spot for the Eagles to feel like they actually need to come out with a more neutral script there. So Silva asked me yesterday. I said I thought I would take A.J. Brown in round 3. We have him here at 24 overall, and Devonta Smith at 55 overall. But yeah, we'll see how the defense plays against Matthew Stafford and Baker Mayfield these next 2 weeks, because I don't think that they're going to just be coming to a game and be like, hey, yeah, let's drop Jalen Hurts back 35 times. It's only going to be if he's forced, so.
And you could stick with, we don't want that low of volume, but it would look better at least if you were going downfield at all. Right now, even he's averaging 2.5 fewer air yards per target than his previous career low. So it's the combination of not passing the ball and not going downfield whatsoever when he does pass the ball.
Right. And he's like, oh, they're playing me zone. They're playing me zone. Buddy, no excuses. Yeah. Play like a champion. Who cares what they're playing? Like, how is that? Oh, well, I couldn't do anything. They were playing zone. It's your job. Whether they're playing man or zone.
Figure it out.
We got to get
we're all hurting. Figure it out.
Jesus Christ.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think we've seen like a whole career of Jalen Hurts in Philly, and his pass attempts per game are way higher than what they've been so far this season. So I just don't, it's 2 games. Like I realized coming off the Super Bowl, the win last season, like everyone's like, oh, the Eagles are the best team in the league. Like there's no way like they're going to get in these negative scripts. Like it can happen. It's not just guaranteed that the Eagles are going to roll every team throughout the whole season. What happens if Saquon Barkley gets hurt? They're going to pass more. What happens if Jalen Hurts were to get hurt, like they have Tanner McKee as the backup quarterback there. He could throw more. I just think there's a lot of outs to the Eagles throwing more, and everyone's just focused on what they've seen so far because that's the easier thing to do. I get it, but I want to be buying low in spots like this.
Yeah, for sure. I do think the Eagles are better now. Like everyone's healthy and the defense is like so good, like better than we've seen in the past. But I hear you for sure. I mean, it's tough to throw the ball this little for an entire season. Things are going to happen. Totally agree. Daigle, let's go to the Dolphins stuff here. So we got a good look at Dolphins in a good spot, hot, home, and offense performed pretty well. I think if you're worried about Dolphins, now would be the time to be like, man, I'm going to get out from under this. I'm not saying that's what I would do, but if you wanted to get out from under the Dolphins, now is the time after a home game against the Patriots in which they played really well. Daigle, what do you think about Dolphins stuff right now and selling it off, perhaps if you're worried about the Dolphins?
I don't necessarily mind selling it since it was a game where we did not nuke them. We thought they could have a good performance, and they did. And the best part about it is that this target tree remains more condensed than ever. Tua came off the field in week 1, but we still have a sample of over 50 dropbacks with him on the field this season. And in that sample, the 3 guys we expect, Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle, have a target share over 20%. Malik Washington is the next closest, not even at double digits for the team. So all the targets go only to 3 locations. And I don't want to sell Devon Achane necessarily. He's getting the exact usage we want. But the other 2 wide receivers, I don't mind at least shopping around. I think this next game on Thursday night is tough. Sean McDermott has had Tua's and Mike McDaniel's number. So maybe it's a situation where you want to sell beforehand.
The reasons for concern long-term for me on Dolphins are A, it starts to get cold and they're withered anyways. B, Mike McDaniel gets fired. And by the way, they're 0-2 now. And they're playing at the Bills. Mike McDaniel gets fired, which I hear you, like, it's probably good for the organization. He seems like he's losing his mind. But I don't think that'd be good for Devon Achane or Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle if Mike McDaniel was fired, right? Like, I don't think that would be a good thing because I still think Mike McDaniel is pretty capable of scheming targets. So, yeah, that's just something to watch there on Dolphins. Let's go to Cowboys, Jack. I took Javonte Williams, I think I did maybe 120 or 130 drafts. I think I took Javonte Williams 3 or 4 times out of all those. And all of those teams are 3 of 4 of my best teams. So Javonte Williams has been the key or one of the keys to the fantasy season so far, in part because of where he was going. He was going 110, 120, 130. I think I got him at some point. We're up to 59 overall now on Javonte Williams. Jack, what do you think about his rest of season outlook after 2 straight pretty impressive performances?
Yeah, I think it's looking good for him. Jaden Blue's still inactive. The Cowboys haven't given us really any indication that that's going to change anytime soon. And he's well ahead of Miles Sanders. The workload was very similar to what it was from a rates perspective in week 1. His route share was down a little bit. His targets were actually up. And his carry share was basically the exact same. He's averaging 4.6 yards per carry so far. He has 3 rushing touchdowns in 2 games. He's clearly ahead of Miles. And as long as Jaden Blue doesn't look like he's going to make a dent in his workload, which as of now, he hasn't even been active yet, I think there's really no reason to be concerned about Javonte, and he's got a pretty ideal matchup on tap in week 3 against this Bears defense that's really struggled so far. The Cowboys have the 3rd highest implied team total of the week, so I think another. I think it's a good outlook for Javonte in the short and the long term.
Yeah, it really is. And then one point that Silva made yesterday, now 2 years removed from the ACL, it's so hard for me to tell on these ACL guys. Like some guys come back in 7 months and they're fine these days. And some guys, it takes years for them to come back and look okay. He certainly looks better than last year, though. I mean, I still don't think he's good, but he still looks much better than last year. And again, we saw Rico Dowdle finished with, as part of the Cowboys there last year, they didn't even have Dak Prescott. Let's go to the Washington Commanders, Mark. We got a bad injury there to great friend of the show, Austin Eckler, lost for the season and possibly his career due to an Achilles tear. I think people's first instincts would be like, oh, well, this is great for Jacory Croskey-Merritt. I would agree that I think it's good for him and that he'll get a little bit more base, but they're not going to just suddenly shove him into pass downs 2 minute. We expect to have Jerry McNichols up for that. So we did move up on JCM or BCM to 90 overall here, which I think is pretty fair. Mark, any thoughts on Croskey-Merritt and Commanders backfield in the wake of Eckler injury?
Yeah, Croskey-Merritt is still pretty much the only Commanders back I would want to roster at this point. He's the only one we have currently in the top 150, but I do think this is still trending towards a three-way running back by committee. And then you also have Jaden Daniels stealing carries, or Marcus Mariota if Jaden Daniels misses any time with this knee injury. We have some games last year without Austin Eckler where Jeremy McNichols stepped in and pretty much played the Austin Eckler role in terms of the passing downs, and Brian Robinson stayed in his role. So, I feel like we've talked about this on tons of pieces of content, but it seems like Jacory Croskey-Merritt's just going to end up in the Brian Robinson role from last year. They could still use Chris Rodriguez, who's been active for the first couple of weeks. If he ends up taking any goal line work away from Jacory Croskey-Merritt, that would be a huge problem. But at this point, I think Bill would be in line for probably 10 to 12 carries on average per week. I think McNichols will be the most involved in the pass game, so don't have a ton of expectations there, but again, he's the one I want to roster right now, but think he's more of like a flex play moving forward, just with all the potential, bodies in the backfield, as well as Jaden Daniels being very involved in the running game too.
Yeah, I'm not sure you could sell Jacory Croskey-Merritt off of last week's box score, right? No one's going to want him after he got 4 carries, but if somebody in your league was like, oh, Eckler's out, JCM's going to be a superstar, I'd be fine selling JCM there. The way that he kind of outperforms our rank here, which is 80th, overall, is he turns into like a really efficient base runner. Like he turns into like Nick Chubb level efficiency or something like that, or not even that, a little bit worse than that, but he's just really efficient on those 9-12 carries per game, which is certainly possible. But, that's not a bet that I typically like to make, especially with 7th round rookies.
Yeah, it's also possible Chris Rodriguez could not be involved as well, but under this regime, we've seen them mix in 3 running backs pretty much every week that they can. So I think that has to be the expectation moving forward until we see anything otherwise.
All right, we need to get to moves to make here, Daigle, but before we do, I wanted to talk about Kyren Williams versus Blake Corum. We saw a bit of a crack in the armor on Kyren Williams. It was just one drive, really, and it was kind of a clock-killing drive. But the game was still in play, and they let Blake Corum get a whole drive, and he capped it off with a touchdown. This was like the most that I've seen Sean McVay let a backup play. I'm not even sure it was the intention, but they kind of put him out there at the beginning of a drive. He got hot, and he stuck out there for the whole drive. So how sticky do you think that is, Daigle? We're at 32 overall right now on Kyren. If this is going to be sticky, we should probably be lower on Kyren, but I'm not sure that it actually is going to be sticky. So we'll see. What do you think about Kyren versus Blake Corum?
McVay came out after the game and mentioned that this is the role he envisions for them. Kyren handling 2/3 of the backfield touches and Corum handling that final third. He's mentioned things like that in the past, and it hasn't mattered. I will say, though, just like the rookies, where I don't expect it to happen overnight, how a running back who is getting fewer touches, I think this is the Nick Chubb, Woody Mark situation as well, how that back who is getting fewer touches gets more is obviously being explosive on his limited opportunity. And that's what Blake Corum has done so far. Corum has as many 10-yard runs as Kyren Williams, who has 29 more carries. So far, every time Corum has touched the ball, he's been equally as good, if not better. And that's how he can make it a 50-50 timeshare. So I am a little bit worried about Kyren Williams, admittedly, especially if Blake Corum continues to look good. Although I will say it's a situation where if Kyren were hurt for whatever reason, I do think they'd also get Jarquez Hunter involved, and it wouldn't just be all Corum's backfield.
Yeah, the scary part here is Kyren Williams is very reliant on volume and touchdowns. Yeah. And if he is not getting this elite workload, this elite volume, and elite red zone role, his value drops significantly, right? And that's why I'm trying to watch this Blake Corum usage so closely. For now, I agree. I don't think that the intention is going to be to actually get Blake Corum 30, 35% of snaps or touches in a game. I just think that's kind of the way that it went. But the door is at least cracked now. So I'm a little worried if I was holding Kyren Williams right now in fantasy for sure.
There is a difference, and this is what happened from week 1 to 2. There is a big difference, as you mentioned, in Kyren Williams getting 91% of the team's backfield touches, or as in week 2, 79%. Yeah. Because he's that inefficient. We genuinely need that 90%.
All right. No one's been listening. No one actually watched. They just fast forwarded all to this moment. It is time for each of us to give 2 moves to make ahead of week 3. Jack, we can start with you. Your first move to make.
Yeah, I'm going to circle back to someone we already talked about and say buy or trade for Quinshon Judkins. I just think that the kind of usage he got after 2 practices in 2 months is pretty ridiculous. And I think the fact that the Browns did that right away, and I mean, not that this matters a lot, but they are listing him as their RB1 on their depth chart after, again, 2 practices and 1 NFL game. I just think it's really bullish. They spent an early second-round pick on him over a guy like TreVeyon Henderson. I understand the concerns with the offense as a whole. I think those are very valid concerns, but I think that some people might see 10 carries for 61 yards and see him get only half of the running back carries and not really grasp how impressive that is with how much time he was away from the team. So I'm going to say buy Quinshon Judkins.
Yeah, I'm curious what the trade market thinks of Judkins with the suspension stuff. Like, I have no idea if he's going to get suspended or not. I know Tony Grossi, who's covered the Browns for a long time, he throws out a lot of hot takes, but he said he was expecting 2 to 4 games at some point for Judkins. I don't think that's like, he's not reporting. I think he's just like kind of guessing, just like the rest of us are. So I don't know. Like, if the trade market is like, I don't want Quinshon Judkins, he's going to be suspended for 4 games, then I definitely think that it's a buy because there's some risk he's not suspended at all, and hopefully we can get through it, and that'll make the price cheaper too. So yeah, I would definitely gauge your opponent, your enemy, on what they think about Judkins' suspension stuff. Mark, your first move to make.
I'm going to go with buy Brian Thomas Jr. Seems like everyone's out on this guy after his poor performance in week 2 against the Bengals. He has only caught 5 of 19 targets so far through 2 weeks, a historically low conversion rate through 2 games. And I'm just not buying that Brian Thomas Jr. can only produce with Mac Jones as we saw last year. You know, Trevor Lawrence may not be a top 10 quarterback, but got to believe he's just as capable as Mac Jones. And I have a lot of faith in Liam Cohen in this offense to get scheme touches to Brian Thomas Jr. We saw the screen game for Tampa Bay be elite last year. I expect Liam Cohen to involve Brian Thomas Jr. in that as well this year. The Jags are currently 9th in pass rate over expectation so far. Their defense is looking wobbly. So I think a lot of people are panicking on Brian Thomas Jr., and I think now's a good time to buy.
Yeah, I mean, buy low 101 on Brian Thomas. If someone's panicking in your league on Brian Thomas, like, lay up to try to buy low there on Brian Thomas like that one. Daigle, your first move to make ahead of week 3.
If you're 0-2, I always like to look around and shop the players that are sun running to make my entire roster better. And I do think Emeka Buka is one of those players we can get a lot for right now. Running hotter than the sun and having a 19.5% target share to Mike Evans' 28.5%. But it's like Buka who has 16 more fantasy points than Evans, all because he's scoring touchdowns. Perhaps that's sustainable, but we're also talking about Chris Godwin potentially coming back in a month and a half. So I am shopping Buka around, understanding regression is probably there.
Emeka, yeah, the Godwin reports have actually been surprisingly good. Like, they finally saw him running, and it sounds like he's going to ramp up and maybe, I don't know what you guys have seen. I've seen maybe be able to play as soon as week 6 or week 7. I'll kind of believe it when I see it, but yeah, the Godwin seems to be coming. There's no doubt about it. For my first move to make here today, I'm going to go sell James Conner. James Conner is fantasy's number 18 running back so far. Pretty solid for a guy who was drafted around running back 20. However, Cardinals so far have played the Saints and then the Panthers. I honestly think the Panthers might have the worst rush defense in the history of the NFL. And the Saints are going to be really bad against the run all season too. So I think those matchups have masked some of the usage problems with Connor. He's only outsnapped Trey Benson 73-47. Routes have been Connor 33, Benson 26. So if I didn't have one of those like heavy running back early drafts, I thought that Connor was fine in like round 5 or round 6. I no longer think he's fine in round 5 or 6 if Trey Benson is going to be playing this much. And that doesn't even count all the age risk stuff. He's 30 now, long injury history, has to play the Seahawks in week 4, Packers in week 7, Seahawks again in week 10, Houston in week 15. So I think some warning flags for me, at least, on James Conner. I would see what I can get out there for him. All right. Second move to make here. Who'd we start with? Jack? Jack, go ahead with your second move to make.
Yeah, my second one is kind of a luxury ad if you have a deeper bench. I recognize not everyone has the roster space, the roster, a second tight end who might not even play this week, but I'm going to say add Isaiah Likely. He could play this week. It sounds like the reports are fairly optimistic, but it's not a given. And Mark Andrews in a full-time role has 2 catches in 2 games. It just seems like he's on the wrong side of 30 at this point. Maybe his career is starting to trend downward. Meanwhile, Isaiah Likely had a breakout 2024 campaign and is trending upward. I think it's possible we see a changing of the guard at tight end for Baltimore. And with how Andrews has underperformed through 2 games, I like getting ahead of Isaiah Likely.
Jack, following in Mark's tradition, submitted a move to make with someone who is not in the top 150. However, on the rest of season top 150 show. However, I will accept this one because I think it's a very good point that Mark Andrews, it's scary, man. I mean, he did have a touchdown like literally in his hands, but the way Isaiah Likely breaks out is if they're like, oh, well, Mark Andrews might only be able to play like 40 or 50% of the snaps here, and we're going to make Isaiah Likely play 70 or 80 if his foot is right. So I'll accept that one from Jack. Mark, go ahead with your second move to make.
It worked out so well for me on Brenton Strange last week, getting a whole 17 receiving yards in week 2. So Jack following suit in a wise fashion there. My second move to make will be to sell J.K. Dobbins. A lot of my moves to make are going to be buying low on players who haven't scored touchdowns and selling high on players who have scored touchdowns thus far. J.K. Dobbins has a touchdown in each of his first 2 games, but I think the floor here is pretty low for Dobbins. He hasn't been nearly as involved in the pass game as I was hoping. This has devolved into a 3-man backfield with Tyler Bidet taking 2-minute and third down snaps, as well as RJ Harvey mixing in as well. And Dobbins I have on a couple teams, and I just feel really, really bad about the floor. I think there's going to be a lot of games where he only rushes for like 50 yards and maybe catches 1 ball, and you're kind of kept holding the bag there. So I think now is a good time to get out on J.K. Dobbins if you can.
Like it. All right. Daigle, your second and final move to make.
I think there are enough people out there who are still interested in rostering Harold Fannin, and so I'm going to shop him around. The exact pendulum we thought could swing did so, and Harold in week 1 having a 21.5% target share and leading the Browns, but then all the way to 12% and finishing 4th, tied for 4th with David Njoku on the team in targets. The Browns offense right now is also leading the league with 46.5 pass attempts per game, but are 13th in pass rate over expectation, suggesting that is not who they want to be. And I still question, when they are the offense they want to be, are they good enough to feed Harold Fannin in a target tree that consists of 5 players? It's not condensed at all, and I still say no. So I'm shopping Harold Fannin right now at his peak.
Well, I'm sorry if I missed it, but also when Joe Flacco is gone, I mean, it's going to be a different story for this whole pass game. You're not going to get 40 dropbacks from Dylan Gabriel. No. I really don't think so. So, not ideal there for Fannin and the rest of the pass catchers. All right. My final move to make will be buy Rashee Rice. We know he's suspended until week 7. So I would only do this buy Rashee Rice move on certain types of teams that I had. But let's say you did the right thing. You know, you started running back heavy. You started CMC JT, or you have Achane and another running back, whatever. You're 2-0. You're deep through the middle rounds at wide receiver. If you think you can accept a suspended player for the next 4 weeks, Rashee Rice is going to go nuts when he gets back. I mean, the Chiefs just need him so badly. Yes, maybe Xavier Worthy is back here for week 3, But Rice's role, I still think, is the valuable one. He's the one that's going to be crossing linebackers' face and running after the catch, which seems to be mostly what Patrick Mahomes wants to throw these days. So maybe it's a little early here, but I think getting in front of the Rashee Rice move before the headlines are Rashee Rice back to save Chiefs in 2 weeks, I think now is the time, especially if someone's 0-2 and they're trying to carry Rashee Rice and hold him through week 7. Now would be an interesting time to try to buy him. All right. That's going to do it for this edition of the Rest of Season Top 150 show. If you want to access our rankings for 1 QB or 2 QB, or you want to use our trade calculator for your redraft team, you do need Draft Kit or in-season product. Head to the subscribe tab on establishthorun.com for details. For Daigle, for Mark, for Jack, for Ryan, for everyone behind the scenes, I'm Adam. Good luck, everybody.